asteroids carrying an invading alien race rain down across Europe. For 5 years, humanity battles against these invaders without much success. Until one day, using newly created mechanized suits, a victory was achieved at Verdun, France. A good portion of this victory was attributed to the now famous Special Forces sergeant named Rita Vrataski. A mechanized invasion of Europe is now planned, as Major William Cage explains its potential. Back in London, Major Cage is flown to meet the commander of the Western Allies, General Brigham. The general orders Cage to accompany the first wave of mechanized forces to land in France. Cage explains to the general he has no combat experience, but the general does not care and dismisses Cage. Cage, in a last-minute effort, attempts to blackmail the general from issuing those orders. This results in Cage being tasered and arrested. When Cage awakens, he finds himself on a tarmac in handcuffs. He has also been stripped of his rank and demoted down to a private, as a sergeant calls him a maggot. A second sergeant, by the name of Sergeant Farrell, takes over and offers to escort Cage to his new assignment. He tells Cage he has been accused of desertion, and he now has a chance to redeem himself through the glory of combat. Farrell introduces Cage to his new team called J Squad. Unfortunately, as he was giving Cage's backstory, Farrell discovers that the squad was gambling. As a punishment, he forces the squad to eat their cards and orders them to have Cage combat, ready for tomorrow's invasion. The next morning, Cage is fitted into his mechanical suit. However, no one bothers to teach Cage how to operate the suite, as they think he will die fairly quickly. As the bay doors open, exposing their drop zone over France, the rear of the dropship suddenly explodes. The squad drops prematurely onto the beach below. Cage struggles to stay alive on the beach. It becomes evident the aliens, called mimics, are well prepared in advance of the Allied invasion. Cage looks up and sees Sergeant Vrataski fighting heroically before him. As he struggles to stand, she is killed instantly. Now in a bomb crater with his squad, a mimic attacks from underneath, killing all of J Squad. Cage lays on the ground stunned as a blue alpha mimic crawls over him. As the alpha hears him, Cage reaches for a claymore mine next to him. The mine instantly kills both Cage and the blue alpha. Cage immediately awakens on top of the tarmac, back where he was a few days ago, with the same sergeant calling him a maggot. As the day progresses exactly in the same manner as it did yesterday, Cage is confused. Again, he finds himself back on the French beach. But this time, Cage manages to save Vrataski from being killed, although he dies in the process. Once again, Cage suddenly awakens on the same tarmac, with the same sergeant calling him a maggot. Cage does his best in trying to convince others of what he is going through, even proving he is capable in predicting everything before it happens. His efforts have no effect, and he finds himself back on the dropship. Again, Cage dies and begins his day on top of the tarmac once again. With each time loop iteration, Cage's combat skills increase, and within each iteration he progresses a little bit further in saving Sergeant Vrataski. Until one iteration, Vrataski drops her sword and tells Cage to come see her when he wakes up. Upon waking, Cage sneaks into the Special Forces training facility. Initially, Vrataski is quite rude to him, until he tells her that she sent him from the future. Vrataski immediately tells him to follow her. As they walk, she explains that he is caught in a time loop brought on by the death of a blue alpha. She was caught in a similar loop at the Battle of Verdun, but was inadvertently kicked out of it. Vrataski leads Cage into an empty room within the weapons repair bay. Following behind them is a man named Carter, who was a former physicist working on the mimics in General Brigham's headquarters. He and Vrataski explain to Cage his time loop was created by the blood of the blue alpha mimic, and if he receives a blood transfusion, it will break the time loop. To maintain the time loop, Cage must kill himself should he ever get injured. They also explain that the blue alpha mimics are all controlled by one omega mimic. The only means to winning the war is to kill this large omega mimic. Unfortunately, they are currently unable to locate its presence. The omega mimic knows Cage has control over the time loops and is looking for him. It will try and connect with him through visions. These visions will reveal the location of the omega. As Vrataski also had these visions, she is sure its location lies just beyond the French beach, and that it is important for them to survive tomorrow's landing and fight their way inland. As Cage tries to process all of this, he asks what they want from him. They tell him he needs to keep dying until the Omega Mimic is finally killed. Vrataski begins training Cage to help him better survive tomorrow's landing. She, of course, kills him every time he gets injured. As Cage does not have prior combat training, she kills him countless number of times. Their training begins to show as they both make it farther and farther inland. Cage starts to grow weary of it all, as he has to witness and relive Vrataski's death numerous times. His time spent with Vrataski in each time iteration has made him emotionally attached to her. Eventually, they make it off the beach and are able to secure a car. During their numerous trips into Germany, Cage gets to know Vrataski in greater detail, even discussing her significant other, who she lost in Verdun. As they run out of both gas and batteries, they continue on foot. They come across a helicopter in the back of a French farm. As Vrataski was injured at some point in their escape from the beach, Cage takes the time to bandage her up. He tries to have a normal conversation with her. She asks him, how many times have they gotten this far? Cage tells her that no matter what they do, she always dies in trying to take the helicopter, and perhaps maybe they should leave it. This infuriates Vrataski, who then marches out to start the helicopter. Once started, an orange mimic promptly kills her. When Cage awakens again, he decides not to get Vrataski involved. He manages to defeat the orange mimics at the French farm and then flies the helicopter to the German dam. He enters the dam and proceeds downwards to where they believe the Omega is lurking. Once at the bottom of the dam, he sees that it is in fact all empty. Upon leaving, he becomes surrounded by mimics who seemingly want to capture him rather than kill him. Luckily, Cage was able to kill himself. Back in England once again, Cage and Vrataski explain to Carter that the German dam was a trap. Vrataski tells Carter the only way of now locating the Omega is by his prototyped transponder. After Cage asks what it is, Carter explains it is a device he built to connect with Alpha, but it is currently sitting in a guarded vault at headquarters. Both Cage and Vrataski agree it's time to pay General Brigham a visit. After several failures in gaining access to the general, they finally manage to convince him to hand over Carter's device. As they leave headquarters, they are chased by security. As Vrataski drives, she helps Cage insert the device into his leg. Cage gets a vision, locating the Omega Mimic within the basement of the Louvre Museum in Paris. Their getaway is suddenly interrupted, knocking both Cage and Vrataski unconscious. Cage awakens, strapped in a hospital gurney with a blood transfusion underway. Vrataski breaks in, and as she was about to kill him, Cage tells her that he has been kicked out of the time loop. They both break out of the hospital with the intentions of heading to Paris to kill the Omega. As Cage can no longer loop through time, he decides to enlist the help from J-Squad, who were, at first, apprehensive towards Cage's plan. However, when J-Squad realizes Sergeant Vrataski is in on Cage's plan as well, they all unanimously agree to head to Paris. When their dropship arrives at the Louvre Museum, the mimics are able to shoot it down. With half of J-Squad now dead, everyone questions if it is possible to even reach the museum, much less kill the Omega. As they argue, Cage is busy formulating a plan. He suggests they use the dropship's engines to shoot themselves forward into the museum. J-Squad decides to sacrifice themselves by offering cover for a better chance for Cage's plan to work. And in fact, Cage's plan seems to work as the helicopter propels itself forward. The orange mimics fight furiously as they approach the museum's front entrance. Once inside, Vrataski tells Cage she will distract the mimics while he drops to the bottom of the museum and detonate a grenade belt. Just before they execute her plan, Vrataski thanks Cage, telling him she wished she had more time to get to know him better. She quickly kisses him before rushing off towards her certain death. It takes little time for a blue Alpha to kill Vrataski before turning its attention towards Cage. Cage quickly dives into the museum's flooded basement. Cage drops the grenade belt onto the Omega. He turns around just in time to see the Alpha reach him as the Omega explodes behind him. As the Omega dies, every mimic dies as a result. During the explosion, the blood of both the Alpha and Cages once again get mixed, resulting in another time loop. And again, Cage awakens, but this time in a helicopter. As he steps off the helicopter, he sees his rank of Major is still intact. Cage cautiously walks inside headquarters to watch General Brigham announce to the world that for some unknown reason, the alien invasion force has died away. Cage returns to the Special Forces training facility, and after approaching Vrataski, she rudely asks him what he wants. Cage, pausing for a moment in self-reflection, can only respond with a playful smile.